First of all, if it's a little bit awkward today, I left my laptop, which had some really awesome videos of Alex, who you heard earlier, and me in what we were covering in the most recent United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change conference, which occurred in Madrid this year. Where I met Dr. Willie Soon was at COP21? One of the conventions of the parties, the United Nations meetings, but it was at the Paris conference, which was huge because we hear all the time, especially with the Green New Deal, about the Paris Agreement and that Trump is trying to get us out of the Paris Agreement, which, by the way, we're not out of, even though you keep hearing we're out of the Paris Agreement. Here's the deal that the United Nations made, and member states, which the United States is a member state, we all agreed, and this was under in 2015, under the Obama administration, that to the Paris Agreement, in order to get out of the United Nations Paris Agreement, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is, it cannot occur without, if, for example, Trump wanted to get us out and he keeps saying he got us out of the Paris Agreement, it could not possibly happen. You have to make an announcement a year ahead of time, like he did last year, saying we are getting out of the Paris Agreement. But it is not possible until the day after the 2020 US presidential election. Isn't that convenient? This is why you see so many Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio and Biden pressing so hard for a Democrat president, because they will put us right back in. We're in until the day after the US. So Trump wins, we're out. Trump loses, we're back in. So this is huge. Because what is the Green New Deal supposed to bring us? No more what? No more airplanes. Retrofit all buildings. Retrofit homes along the way. Commercial airplanes, traveling, all of that decreases. So in other words, our freedoms and liberties disappear based on this thing called the Green New Deal. So anyway, with all that said, I've got tons of really cool videos that I was going to show you guys. But on my way here yesterday morning, I left my laptop in the pocket seat in front of me. So my laptop right now with the presentation I was going to show you is in Des Moines, Iowa. So anyway, I rushed so I changed my flights. I stayed in Denver. I'm telling you all this because if this comes choppy, I've never done a presentation from my iPad before, and I'm stumbling with my iPad. So please forgive the roughness of this presentation, just knowing that life happens and we make it work no matter what. So anyway, thank you, Willie. Okay. This is a presentation on Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the agenda for the 21st century. This is my third year at Camp Constitution, and I will always give a similar presentation as the one I'm giving you today, which is similar to the one I did last year and the year before. Why? Because this is the biggest agenda in our lifetime. We have globalists and deep state people who Alex was talking about earlier. This is their legacy. Even though hardly anybody in the United States of America knows about United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, they're starting to feel it. And so for decades now, we've been trying to alert the American people about this thing called United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. So what's in this talk? Well, as Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. And so as an update, there's nothing new about Agenda 21 except that they're ramping it up. They're ratcheting up their efforts to get this agenda done, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit, done by the year 2030. So they're stepping it up so that by the year 2030, there's no turning back. This agenda requires a government who believes in democracy, mob rule, This is an agenda that requires a government to ignore our sovereignty, to ignore our Constitution, to want to rewrite the Constitution. A government that wants, or people in government who want to erode our natural God-given rights. All those things must occur in order to implement this agenda. And that's nothing new, because there's been dictators our entire human history of trying to control people. And this agenda is no different. So we're going to revisit some of the things that I've talked about in the last couple years. And then we're going to talk about the global governance that's happening. Really, it's oppression, and it's on the rise, as you probably have been feeling with these lovely little masks, by the way. You know, normally I start my presentation with lipstick. You probably remember that. And I put on lipstick and I say, what's wrong with lipstick? Anybody want to tell me what's wrong with lipstick? In the 21st century, think climate change. What's wrong with lipstick?
Plastic.
What's it made of? Yeah, plastic. Okay, what else? What's it made of? Petroleum. So under the Green New Deal, aren't we trying to go 100% fossil fuel free? So that means my fossil fuel bifocals that help me see better, I don't know what they're going to make them out of. But anyway, so all those things go. But anyway, I find it quite fascinating that, you know, I don't even need to wear lipstick anymore in the 21st century. I'm muzzled. I'm muffled. Isn't that interesting? And yet this is supposed to be the new norm. This is supposed to be part of the Great Reset. Has anybody flown recently? Been in an airport? I just spent a lot of time in an airport getting here. It is bizarre to see everybody walking around with a mask as if it's no big deal. And I'm sitting there screaming under my mask, breathing my own hot air, feeling fatigued, feeling something's not like lightheaded, uncomfortable, and wondering, why are people wearing a mask? It's not mandated in the airport. They can't, you know, and here, just for those of you, kind of getting a little off track, but this is all about freedom and liberty. What I did here is there was a man on the plane that I was supposed to take earlier, but I got off because of my laptop, who would not put on a mask. He was in seat 26A. And the pilot got off, and while I was sitting up there with the gate agent trying to figure out how I go, do I run and get my laptop if they have it, which is 2 terminals over? Will I make the plane, et cetera, et cetera. And the pilot's out there saying, I need you to call a supervisor immediately. She said, why, what's going on? A passenger refuses to put on his mask. And passengers around him are saying, we want to move. Do you see the fear out there? We are now afraid of our own species. So anyway, supervisor comes up and he says, what's the problem? Guy won't wear a mask. What's his excuse? He says he has a medical condition. And the supervisor says, well, can't do anything. And the pilot says, but everybody wants to move around him. And he says, I'm sorry, it's the same thing with a disability. So if you say you have a disability and you want to get on the plane earlier, they have to trust your word. So anyway, just for those of you who do not want to wear a mask, on a plane, and I used it, it did work. I had my mask slightly below my nose because I couldn't breathe last night. And I'd been wearing a mask, not all day, but probably a good 7 hours. From the mall that did require a mask, Apple requires you to wear a mask. They take your temperature. They ask you questions like, have you had a headache recently? Have you been around anybody who's been sick? And then they ask you to stand back. And in order to buy a laptop, then they need to escort you in. When you go to the counter, the Apple counter, they've got an Apple bag that you would put purchased items in. And the Apple employee stands next to that Apple bag and says, you need to stand over here at the computer. I need to stand at this Apple bag for social distancing. I mean, this is crazy. And before I go on any further, and I forget, I know somebody within my own government who works in Mascalifornia for security, that's California, by the way, who works in security, Department of Homeland Security in the Sacramento Capitol. She's a Christian who would tell you that my governor often does not wear a mask nor social distance while he's at the Capitol working with other people. But he's going around telling you and me what to do in the state of Mascalifornia. Isn't this bizarre? But this is the same thing with the whole climate change thing. And all these things, what they have in common is the topic that we're talking about today, which is an agenda to a global governance system based on one. So I may have forgotten to say something within that comment, but anyway, we'll move on because I'm going to run out of time. Okay, and so all of this, you guys, is in your face. It really is. Today, it's really in your face, this agenda. A few conferences that I've been to gather my information. Back in 2012, the United Nations Rio Earth Summit, the Eco-City Conference in Melbourne, Australia, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement, that's where I met Willie, and I also met Alex Newman there. UN Habitat 9, which was in Malaysia, which is where Willie is from. The name of that conference was Cities for All, because by the year 2050, they, who's they? The globalists, the people that Alex talked about, the people who Willie talks about, the people who would have a new world order, a one world system, feel that by the year 2050, 80% of the world's population will live in cities. And that is the goal of Agenda 21 too, as I'll show you in a bit. By the way, there is a map that I hope gets passed around. This map is the Wildlands Project map. It's part of the United Nations Agenda 21 agenda. And when you look at this map as it passes you, red means no human use. Yellow means limited to no human use. This map is being implemented to this day. It is happening. So anyway, so Cities for All. If you'll see on that map, it's going to show the black spots. That's where the mega cities, the mega regions are. That is their goal, that we live in the mega regions. And there's 11 on that map. So I went to Poland with Alex Newman and COP24. And you'll remember last year, who remembers last year the video that I took of the Katowice, the Poland's children's choir, singing about how they can't breathe and the earth is catching on fire, and I was crying because this is so disturbing that they're using these children. Anyway, so that was an interesting conference to go to. I went to this year, so since I've seen you last year, here's a few things that have happened. In Salt Lake City in August a year ago, I went to the first major United Nations conference in the United States of America. And it was called the 78th Civil Societies Conference. In fact, if you go to Camp Constitution's website, you'll see a video that I'm in where a protester, if you will, a mom of 4 kids, was there with her children passing out little cards, like business cards, to alert the people within the conference, because most people in America have no clue what the United Nations is up to. Kids in college are being taught that the United Nations is a positive thing. In fact, this is a book that I got from Montana University, or Montana State, in Bozeman last year as I was doing a presentation. Their required reading was tons of these books, whether it was architecture or sustainability in museums, curating museums under Agenda 21. They even talked about Agenda 21 in this museum book. There was another book on, biodiversity, and they went back and they expressed, where did this all come from? From Agenda 21, the Rio Earth Summit. So it's there. It's out there for all of us to see. But what's missing is like breaking down that wall of Americans that this could ever happen in America. Friends, it's happening. They are this close to having these agendas accomplished. They are a presidential election. They are November away from this utopia becoming true. Anybody disagree with me? You can. Okay, so at the Salt Lake City, Utah conference, what happened is there was a woman, she was, protesting with her kids, handing out these cards and saying, go check out the UN, go check out what they've been up to. I mean, there's been child raping going on and false science. I mean, it is a corrupt organization, just taking our monies for its funding, and corrupt, as you learned from John McManus. And so she was handing out these cards, and a United Nations police or security officer in her United Nations blue outfit, we call them blue helmets, came up and said, "You need to take your family and leave." And she said, "Wait a minute, this is my city." Amy is her name. Amy says, "This is my city." And she said, "And you need to quit filming me," the United Nations officer said. And Amy's like, "Wait, this is my city. I have a right to film." And the United Nations officer, here's the bottom line to this. She said, as of Sunday, and this isn't exactly verbatim, as of Sunday, the United Nations took over this building. And they took over the building and the sidewalks and the streets. This is a United Nations compound, she says. Out those doors, the United States. In here, the United Nations. That's huge. So what the UN is saying is wherever they go and they declare this a UN territory, international territory, she did say that UN international territory, does that trump the supreme law of the land now? So that was huge, and this was the first major public conference that the United Nations has held in the United States of America. A couple other things happened. Walt Disney stars were there promoting sustainable development goals. I interviewed one of the stars of, I can't remember what show it is, but he's Luke Mullen is his name, and he's wildly popular with younger generation. And I interviewed him about he was one of the main speakers, and I said, I grabbed him, and all these kids are like running around him and like wanting his autograph and pictures, so I knew this guy was a big thing. And I asked him, how did you get tapped for this? And he said, the United Nations just, came up to me, it's Walt Disney, by the way, Disney company, and asked if I would present at this conference. And I said, well, when did you hear about the Sustainable Development Goals? And he's like, I just heard about them. So here he is doing a speech on Sustainable Development Goals and how we need to each implement them, all 17 of them, and he had just heard about them. Extraordinary. So anyway, after that, I went to Madrid with Alex Newman and CFACT. I missed Willie there. And in Madrid, it was phenomenal. I'll show you a few videos from Madrid. I met Greta Thunberg. I met her father. I ran into Al Gore for the third time, and I shook his hand. And unfortunately, I do not have the video of my interaction with Al Gore. Last year, I showed you the one I did in Park City, Utah. And this year, let me just tell you this about Al Gore. I was in a smallish room. It was in a room called We Are Still In, hosted by the United States. People who were in there were Democrats and policymakers from the United States. They also shared this exhibit with the World Wildlife Foundation. So, right there, you get the picture. And so I happen to be getting free food and free drink like Alex and I like to do, because if you're in a room where there's a speech and it's like 5 o'clock or 5:30, out comes the meat, hors d'oeuvres, out comes the wine, out comes all the fanfare, the lights, the music, everything, the hypocrisy. So I'm seeing all this food, and I'm in there first, and I'm seeing all this wine, and it's like the end of the day, and I can't wait to have a glass of wine and have some meat, because I see the meat coming in. And all of a sudden, people are like, okay, make the wave, TV camera, video cameras are coming in, big video cameras, and I'm like, who's coming? And they're like, Al Gore. And I'm like, yes. Again. So I caught him in Australia, I caught him in Park City, Utah, and now I'm catching him in Madrid. And so he makes his way and he's hugging people through the room, and then he gets to me, and I'm not kidding, I wish I had this video to show you. He gets to me, I'm like, oh, Al, I really am. It sounds so silly, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I just put out my hand, you see on my camera, and he put out my hand, and he looks down, and he gives me a frown, and he walks up on stage. But everybody else he was so happy to see. I'm not kidding. So I'm guessing he knows who I am now, but I think that's a pretty good thing. So, okay, and then, so let's get going. Let me show you first my interaction when I first saw Greta Thunberg and the craziness that happens around Greta Thunberg. With the New American Magazine and going as media, I'm getting information that people aren't. The public isn't. Even Al Gore doesn't get this information, supposedly. Supposedly we as media, because they want us to get what's going on in these conferences out there as soon as possible. So I get a text saying, Greta's here, she'll be over in this area, so I run over there. And so did everybody else.
Wow. Don't push in there.
You're pushing. Can you hear that very well? Can you hear me? I can't hear me. I can't hear the interaction. And there she is. Just for that glimpse of Greta Thunberg, people were going crazy the entire conference. She is a mega star at these conferences. I talked to her father, and I recognized him from a couple years ago, and I talked to her father, and I said, does she really believe this? And she's like, yep. He's like, yep, she really does. She has Asperger's, and I think she's being used by adults to win over not only children with the Fridays for Future, but also willing adults who are being educated. They're not being given Dr. Willie Soon's presentation. Anyway, so the other thing, it was a great conference. Alex and I had said back in 2018 at the Poland conference, we both said, this is it. We're never going to a United Nations conference again. They are dark. You see the major hypocrisy. I talked to some college students at the Madrid conference, and it's sad. I asked them about, will you ever have children? These are college students, Duke University, Indiana University. There was Yale there, lots and lots of colleges from the United States at the Madrid conference. And the Duke University students said to me that they are part of the no crowd. It's not an official thing, they say. What's the no crowd? We won't be having any children. Why? Because too many people are degrading planet Earth. Who else was at this conference that we talked to? Mayor Bloomberg, before he announced his presidency. Alex shouted out, hey, can you tell us about population? And he's like, have a good day. And we were right next to him.
If I remember correctly, in the Poland one, they even tore a block of ice from somewhere in Greenland, and it was a stunt. These people are crazy stuff, just to let the ice stand there and then melt. That's to make a point.
They're stunt pullers. They pull stunts. There was another guy who did Woodstock. He directed a film, the Woodstock film, I can't remember his name, but his whole presentation was on depopulation. And so what we were saying at this conference was a big major theme in your face was depopulating planet Earth. The other thing that I've been up to is all year long now. We had the Camp Constitution 2020 Agenda 21 Challenge.
Yeah.
And it was the best part of my year, and I say that with all sincerity. And something that takes a close second is my normal ranch duties. So this is, I love this. Jefferson, Betsy Ross, and Benjamin.
All right.
And I named them those names after, Willie naming his children because he loves America so much. Emily, Benjamin, and Franklin. So anyway, that was an inspiration by you. But you know what? This is my true love, and I know it's under attack. These are 3 calves who have lost their parents, or the mom, the cow, couldn't produce enough milk to keep these guys alive. But anyway, today they're like this big. They're huge. Anyway, and I can't wait to get home to them. But you know what I say from the past, and I'll forever, ever share this symbol, is that life is in the details. And when you start seeing the things that you're learning here at Camp Constitution year over year, you start to see them out in the real world, right? Yeah. For example, FedEx, if you know it, don't say it, but how many know the symbol within FedEx that once you see it, Marley, you can never unsee it anymore? Who knows it? Okay, go ahead.
It's the arrow.
The arrow. So that detail, right? That little tiny detail that to FedEx means so much, because FedEx changed its whole logo, Federal Express, so that it could have a symbol within its logo that represents what FedEx does in the world. What does FedEx do? It forwards things. And so that is all of FedEx right there. That little tiny symbol. And now that you see it, you'll never ever unsee it. So the next time the next FedEx truck comes by, you first thing are probably going to see that arrow. I hope that to be the case more and more about the topic of Agenda 21, the deep state, the Constitution, our God-given rights, the Bible. More and more we engulf those things, we embrace them, we absorb them, the more and more we're going to see and hear out there, outside these walls, of what's going on out there, and I declare the solution too. So I think it was Daniel Webster who said, give them the means for detecting the wrong. In other words, educate them. Give them the means for detecting the wrong, and they will apply the remedy. They'll apply the solution. But unless we see the problem, how can we possibly provide a solution or a positive solution? The ultimate goal of where we're going today, truly, is called a mega region. And you may recall this map from last year. There are 11 mega regions that we are being forced into right now. And we'll talk about the forcing. I live in the I used to live in the Northern California region, which is already officially regionalized. What does that mean? 101 cities, 9 counties now working policy, regulation, politically under one plan called the One Bay Area Plan, or the Plan 2040, or the 2040 Plan. It is done by what we call a council of government, a non-elected, self-appointed, bureaucratic agency, maybe your mayor, it may be an elected official, who sits on this board, but you didn't elect them to this board. And what are they doing? COGs all across the United States. Hal, what's your COG? What's your council of government? Do you know the name of it? Denver's is called Dr. COG, Denver Council of Governments. The Southern California is Southern California Association of Governments. In the Bay Area, it's called the Association of Bay Area Governments. All over the United States, there are Council of Governments. And my understanding is there's now Council of Governors who all believe that, United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development is the future for the 21st century. That being said, they are all working hard and diligently to make that happen. Yes, sir. Yeah, okay. So you have and here's the thing about knowing about your COGs, your Council of Governments. They have meetings. You need to start going to those meetings, because they're doing the planning, they're working on the rezoning, they're working on where your school should be in the future, where the hospital should be. They are doing the work that you locally should be doing, and the people you elect locally should be doing. But under the One Bay Area Plan, under a mega region like this, you merge 101 cities and 9 counties into under one comprehensive plan. So your power as a voter, electing people, is like worthless under this kind of system. This is what the future of living looks like. In fact, at all the United Nations conferences I attend, all of them point to China and Mascalifornia for what the future should look like. High rise, the built world, high density living, walk, bike, take public transportation everywhere you go. Why? To save planet Earth from the degradation of humanity. There are three main documents that we talked extensively about that last year. We'll go just briefly through. That the United Nations uses as their document, as their blueprints. The one that most people are familiar with is the first book I have up there called The Earth Summit for Agenda 21. It's 300 pages, 40 chapters, and I think it's chapter 27, don't quote me, but that is written by an organization called ICLEI, the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives. As Hal will tell you, ICLEI has been busy in the east part of the United States, getting cities to sign a memorandum of understanding for your greenhouse gas emissions and your climate action plans. And so your city signs on and you agree then under that memorandum, that MOU, to go along with the Earth Charter. It says it right in the agreement. And so all the tenets of the United Nations Earth Charter, which in another way put is Gaia worshiping, that Earth Charter initiative, Rockefeller, George Soros, Maurice Strong, all involved in that Earth Charter. The Earth Charter is to replace the 10 Commandments. The document that most people have not read, but I have, and it's that thick 1,147-page document that's like this big and weighs about 5 pounds, that when I'm on an airplane and I'm reading it and I'm marking through it, people are like, she must be some awesome PhD. Because this book, and what this book, the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report, says is, for example, section 11.2.3.2 about human influences on biodiversity. And when you think biodiversity, you think plants, animals, parks where grass grows, where birds fly, and where bees pollinate, and where deer run. That's what we're talking about when we talk about biodiversity. It's the oceans, it's the water, it's the trees, it's everything outside of the humans and the human-built world. It says about human beings in the agricultural world, which is in America, a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world society at the present North American, where are we right now? North America. Material standard of living would be 1 billion people. How many people live in the United States of America? So we're going to be limited, right?
Yeah.
Dietary habits, like those of Westerners, you and me, we eat meat, are at the heart of the problem that they say. Yeah. Here's some more things in that big biodiversity. I call it the Crook Book. Here's some more things that they consider harmful to planet Earth. Ski runs, grazing of livestock, cows, sheep, goats, horses, fences, large-hoofed animals. Why large-hoofed animals? Because when a large-hoofed animal makes a dent in the ground, makes a footprint, and they smash plants. Modern farm production, I'll skip through. Logging activities, modern hunting, harvesting of timber, power line construction. Really? Private property, land use that serves human needs. Judeo-Christian Islamic religions. Why? Because we promote family. We promote helping our community. I don't know about, well, I better not say that. Okay. And then golf courses and scuba diving, and this place would be considered unsustainable. The United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, this is from the very first one. I went to the 9th one in Malaysia. Land, because of its unique nature and the crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset. What do we find super, super important here in the United States of America? Right to life, liberty, and what? Pursuit of happiness, and how would it used to say? Pursuit of property. But not all people want property, but we all want happiness. So for us, private property is not just the land that you own. Private property is your hands, your head, your brain, your thoughts, your religion. It's the thoughts in your head and what you create with your hands. That's yours in this country. It's valuable, it's precious until you give it away. But that should be up to you, not an oppressive government. Private land ownership, according to them, is a principal instrument of accumulation. In other words, wealth. And concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to one of their biggest agendas right now, social equity. It contributes to social injustice. Social justice, urban renewal and development, the provision of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for the people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of the society as a whole. Is your backyard, should it be of interest to the society of a whole? But now they're claiming, because of biodiversity, that whatever happens on your land that can happen on another person's land, like let's say you have an invasive grasshopper and it's in your yard and you're raising it, or I'm just making something up, and now it goes over to the next neighbor's yard and destroys the neighbor. We have millions of grasshoppers right now going through our pastures, destroying our cow and horse pastures. So that invasive species, because of what that species can do, and it was brought from your land, now what you do on your land is your neighbor's business. There's such better examples, but anyway. The whole thing about sustainable development, which is really what we're talking about, the official name of Agenda 21 is United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. It's the agenda for the 21st century for the entire globe to implement based on this thing called sustainable development. This is why you hear about sustainability everywhere you go. Sustainable farming, sustainable business, sustainable park, all this sustainability. How come it wasn't, that we're just now hearing this word so often? It's almost like a fad, isn't it? But it's everywhere now. You can't even go through an airport without seeing the word sustainable. You can't go to a hotel and stay in a hotel room without seeing the word sustainable. Now the next thing is going to be COVID-19 everywhere, just like sustainability is. But here is the true definition of sustainable development. It is the economic, social, and environmental aspects of any action where it's interconnected. In other words, social equity. So if a business, for example, is to be considered sustainable in today, you must incorporate these three ideas into your business. Social equity, social justice, what does that mean? Equal rights, right? Equal rights, the whole thing about the women's movement, right? It is lands under Black Lives Matter, all lands under social equity. There's another one that Indian Native Americans are pushing, which is the stolen land movement, and it is now being incorporated with the Black Lives Matter riots. Economic justice, what's that? Wealth redistribution. Food stamps, wealth redistribution. Reparations. Environmental justice, oh, yes, and that's what we're doing now. Vito, thank you for that. We are now there's now a movement to start getting people that the polluter pays idea in things that happened in the past. Slavery being an example, where there will be monetary funds. There's going to try and be like lawsuits happening under economic justice. And then the other one that is part of sustainable development, a huge one, is environmental justice. Rocks have rights, rivers have rights, et cetera, et cetera. Animals have rights, animals can sue. So under sustainable development, we have social equity, economic justice, environmental justice. In other words, people, profit, planet. We think globally, but we must act locally. Think about COVID-19. Aren't we hearing it's spreading all around the globe? And so therefore, we must start thinking here how not to pass it along. Does that make sense? So you must wear a mask. Even though a mask does not protect you, it's supposedly supposed to protect another person, like vaccines. Even though you get vaccinated, you're supposedly not protected unless you're all vaccinated. Sound familiar? So think global, act local. This is about a whole community. It's about a community that cooperates with one another and with orders. And it's all for the collective good. So how do you get an agenda, a global governance scheme in place? Well, you have a global crisis. What about 9/11? Haven't we forever changed the way we travel based on, no matter what you think of 9/11, traveling has been fundamentally transformed based on 9/11. Now, COVID-19. Traveling has been fundamentally transformed where we all wear masks, we have to social distance. I tried to get coffee today at Dunkin' Donuts, but you can't even go in. There's a long car line, and you can't even go inside because of social, here. So I said, forget coffee, and I shoved on. Okay, so there's a global crisis, right? And they're predicting yet another wave. So we have a global crisis like COVID-19, which requires a global solution. Are masks required in other countries? Could Lord Monckton travel here? No. Not without huge, he had to get approval from the governor?
It had official government business.
It had to be official government business and approved by the governor. My brother-in-law's brother died a few months ago. He had cancer, and his younger brother. And Steve tried to get back to Hawaii before Greg died. And he died during the process of Steve, my brother-in-law, trying to get approval by the governor of Hawaii to come see his brother. He ended up going after Greg died anyway, and he had to get approval of the governor and also the hotel where he was staying, and they were going to make him self-quarantine in the hotel before he could travel around Hawaii. I mean, this is happening everywhere. So you have a global crisis, you need a global solution. Yeah?
No, sorry, I was just making fun of it.
Oh. You need a global community with global cooperation for global enforcement for a global reset. This is an agenda to one world government. This is Agenda 21. They're using the COVID-19 as a way to get all these things that they wanted under the Green New Deal done. They're merging them together. In fact, when it comes to racism for the black community, they're now putting in climate change, that they are oppressed by climate change as well as racism. So it all fits into their big scheme for the 21st century, Agenda 21. Now remember, as we go through this, just keep on thinking of this map where we're being moved into different regions. You're being moved out of your car. This is not my conspiracy. It's, Nancy Pelosi, for example. In fact, she's the one back in 1992 to the House on a Friday night talking about this.
House concurrent resolution 353, concurrent resolution expressing the sense of the Congress that the United States should assume a strong leadership role in implementing the decisions made at the Earth Summit by developing a national strategy to implement Agenda 21 and other Earth Summit agreements through domestic policy and foreign policy.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of H-Con Res. 353, expressing the sense of the Congress that the United States should assume a strong leadership role in implementing the decisions made at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. I now yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Pelosi, the sponsor, to explain the resolution. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. In fact, it is a very simple resolution, which the gentleman has just mostly explained. The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint Agenda 21 for global environmental action. Congress 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution. We must make the promise of Rio a reality. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We must make the promise of Rio a reality. With as much or as little as you may know about Agenda 21, can you please, with a show of hands, let me know if do you see it happening in your area where you live? Great, there's a lot of hands. Can someone give me an example of what you see happening in your neck of the woods that you would describe to somebody who's never heard of Agenda 21? Would somebody be willing to do that? Describe something that, if Gus Kalis were in here, he'd say bike paths. Yes, Tina.
The type of buildings they build and how they lay out stores and, what do you call it, homes close to each other.
Yep, so how close in proximity homes are, stores, everything's in walking, biking, or public transportation distance, right? Yeah, Vito.
They've been progressively in New York City closing down streets and areas of necessary high traffic, vehicle traffic, so they become just pedestrian walkways and plazas and things like that.
Yeah.
So that there's no automobile traffic, and it's sort of to force people onto mass transit that's already kind of operating at the most capacity and is often breaking down.
Yeah, so they are. They're shutting down streets. You could see this in San Francisco, and it's quite interesting under COVID-19. They're doing this, shutting down streets to put restaurants so you can be a good global citizen and eat outside, which is absolutely ludicrous. I just have to get this off my chest. Flying, okay, I'm in the airport, everybody's wearing masks. I'm hungry, I go to one of the restaurants and you get seated, right? You get seated and you can take off your mask. And I'm chewing, and people are sitting next to each other in the bar and they're drinking beer and they're getting drunk and their mask is off. TSA, you go through the TSA I go through pre-check. If you don't have pre-check, I recommend it, it's awesome. So when you go through TSA checkpoint, you have to wear a mask, right? And you give them your ticket, which you've been handling, or your cell phone, you know, and your ID, right? Which you've been handling. So they're wearing gloves, they handle it, they look at it, they tell you to put down your mask. Now you've got whoever from their gloves, you know, germs from whoever, you know, he's already looked at their information. And so now you put your mask back on, and you take your ID, you stick it in your pocket, you have your luggage now goes on, you know, the conveyor belt. There's been tons of people with, you know, who knows where their suitcases have been now are on the conveyor belt. There's just this massive exchange of germs going back and forth regardless of the mask. It's crazy. Air conditioning is going on in these airports and restaurants, and things flow. It's crazy. I'm not saying COVID-19 is not real. I know coronavirus is real. I'm exposed to coronavirus every single day on the ranch. Over 70% of all adult cows' manure has coronavirus. Birds carry coronavirus, dogs, cats, and you're going to see, I guarantee, information coming out soon, I guarantee this is coming, where they're going to say, oh no, because of what just happened under COVID-19 and how dangerous it was as the flu, somehow it's the most woke virus in all of history, that it can be in Walmart or not be in Walmart, but it'll be in a mom and pop shop that needs to shut down. But you can go shop at Walmart, you can shop at Home Depot, all these major stores, right? And yes, go ahead.
But something else that you talked about last time too is this plastic bag issue, where now we can't bring our own bags that they feed us.
Right.
Into the grocery stores or stores, but now they have the plastic bags.
They flipped it. They flipped it. And isn't it nice to see in public bathrooms now hot water and paper towels?
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so excited. Yeah, go ahead, please.
On this note, so I don't know if Trader Joe's is doing this around you guys, but our Trader Joe's stopped using paper bags and is now only using plastic because there's a paper shortage because of all the toilet paper people are buying. I'm like, I asked that, did you hear what you just said? And he's like, well, that's what they told us.
It's, I mean, the hypocrisy, the double standards, is truly, truly unreal. So we just watched a video of Nancy Pelosi in 1992 talking about implementing Agenda 21 and making Agenda 20, the road to Rio, a reality. Here's what the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So just a really quick history. 1992, Rio Earth Summit, they promulgated United Nations Agenda 21 to the entire world. George Herbert Walker Bush. Alex has a video of this, it's on my other laptop, of George Herbert Walker Bush talking about the big document called Agenda 21, and almost in the same breath he is talking about a new world order. But he was very excited about Agenda 21. That was at the Rio Earth Summit during a press conference. Later that year, October 2nd, 1992, was that video of Nancy Pelosi saying, we must make Rio a reality. In other words, United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development a reality. The following year, Al Gore was vice president and Bill Clinton was president. And under their administration that year, actually almost at the anniversary of the first Rio Earth Summit, they created Executive Order 12852. The President's Council on Sustainable Development. So when people say, those conspiracy theorists who talk about Agenda 21, and even though Agenda 21, this is what they say, even though Agenda 21 is a real thing, it's only voluntary, and it's not voluntary. When you have a president requiring through an executive order every federal government agency adopting all the things under sustainable development for the next decade, and then you have your mayors and your city council members adopting comprehensive plans that look like another comprehensive plan in Germany, where was our say? Where were we saying, yeah, we want to be a part of that? They didn't even tell us this. They didn't even tell us about Agenda 21. There is a document out there that says, by a guy named J. Gary Lawrence out of the state of Washington. He's a planner still, big proponent of Agenda 21, who said that in America we're not going to call it Agenda 21 because out would come the NRA people and the conspiracy theorists who would not want to elect people who are pushing Agenda 21 or endorsing Agenda 21, so we'll call it something else. They're not going to call it Agenda 21. They're going to call it a comprehensive or smart growth or comprehensive planning, community or smart community strategy. So they had to rename it in order to get it through, sneak it through here in the United States. So why is this thing so scary that they don't want to talk about it? Effective execution of Agenda 21. So from the President's Council on Sustainable Development, Executive Order 12852 came this document. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. This is huge. This means that your health under something like universal health care is now my business. If you don't exercise and you smoke and you drink and you don't take care of yourself because I'm paying into the system that you're taking from, it's now my business of how you take care of yourself, you see? That is a scary plan here here in America when private property is supposed to be, at the core of who we are as a people with our God-given rights. Because if government can give you your rights, government can.
Do you think that's why they're promoting this, the mask only works in one direction thing?
Absolutely.
It's a name, but yeah, you're responsible for someone else's.
Absolutely. That is a great statement.
Getting people ready for it.
Yes, that is perfect. Yes, so now what you do affects another person. It's no longer, hey, friendly, it's now, you're affecting me. You are, and so hence the fear of other people is the new norm.
I had a similar experience. Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
Just briefly. Just have a couple months ago, I wrote to friends about it because it was just curious. And, you know, of course, where I'm in New York City, it's not uncommon. So I was just outside my house. You know, I have a house in the city, so it's a little lot, and I have a corner property on a cross street. And I, you know, I was putting around outside, checking my garden and whatnot. And there's not that many people around, and it's sort of sparse, you know, neighborhood or whatever as far as people were. So there's a couple, an older couple walking around, and they're wearing their face masks. This is what developed. Everybody walking around wears face masks, even though there's like nobody around. It's, you know, the next person's going to be hundreds of feet from you or something like that. So I'm over there by myself, you know, walking around, and I'm not wearing a mask or anything like that. You know, looking at my head and whatever, and the couple comes over, and the guy says, "Where's your mask?" I says, you know, I says, "Why are you wearing a mask? Are you sick?" And he says, you know, as though I should. He says, "You should love your neighbor as yourself." And I said, "Well, I do." You know, so the implication is because I'm not wearing a mask, I don't love my neighbor, and I'm a wicked person.
Yeah.
You know? So, and you know, I don't know what this.
You get the mask shame looks. Let me tell you, if you're not, I did in the airport when I was not wearing a mask. But you get mask shamed, and it's
happened a lot,
unreal.
You know, and to my wife and stuff with stores and stuff like that. They're very panicky, but they put pressure on business owners because in the city, if you have somebody in without a mask,
they'll shut you down.
Fine you maybe $1,000.
Shut you down. So no shoes, no shirt, no service. And because they're a private business, they can do it.
Yeah.
And because they're a business and they're going along with all this, they're in fear that the government will shut them down and the health department is going to fine them or take away their medical license or whatever license they have.
And that because it's not the individuals, but because they do this through these commercial and medical, you know, Department of Health. You know, I go in there, I don't want the guy to be upset. I don't want him to get in trouble. So, you know, I cooperate where I can, but where I don't have to,
There will be a place where, like I did at the airport, there will be a place where you just conform. And then when you're wearing a mask for a while, you're like, well, it's not so bad. For me, it got really bad later on. But I think that's the nudging that's going on, the conforming that's going on.
Just add something that other people were saying, and you said earlier, this is just a point. I had a chapter meeting, and our little chapter in the house, we weren't doing any of the type of stuff they required, so we were just having a regular, normal activity. And we had a couple of new people come, now the one lady, she's a nurse, young woman, and she works in surgery. So she's been busy with whatever that she's been reassigned with, but she's probably, things are letting up for her. So she was saying she's going to wear a mask because all day she has to, she's in a medical surgical thing. But she says they had a case where there was a woman, I think it was a woman, that, you know, they were wearing a mask all the time, and they actually developed a very serious lung infection because of rebreathing carbon dioxide so frequently. So, I mean, there's direct medically detrimental effects to wearing a mask on any kind of length of time. And you probably heard the other stories, like the doctor was wearing it while he was driving a car and he passed out. Yeah, there's going to be more stories like that to come. I can tell you from personal experience, I can tell you, so we got to move on here, but I can tell you from the mask thing, it'll probably come up again though, that from personal experience wearing it over 7 hours yesterday, I was fatigued, my mind was not thinking straight, it's not good. And there are going to be more health issues come up as a result, mark my word. So in Madrid, I'll go through some things quickly because I think we're falling a little bit behind, but thank you everybody for your contribution to getting the point across so far. So in Madrid, on my birthday, my 50th birthday was December 2nd, I got to the Madrid conference early. It was supposed to be in Chile. I was going to go to Patagonia for my, for this huge 50th birthday that I was going to have going through Patagonia, but
because of the riots happening in Chile, which were all based on the environmental pressures that the citizens were being forced with. They were protesting the environmental stuff that the government was trying, right, Alex? That government was trying to force upon the people, and they were done with it. But you don't hear that in the media. You heard that they're upset about climate change. They were, but not the way that the media spun it. So because of the riots...
Increase of the subway fare, no?
What was that?
It's just the increase of the subway fare. It's just people cannot afford it.
Couldn't afford it, yeah. And so
Green stuff, you know?
So they changed the conference to Madrid, just a sidebar. So I planned my trip to Patagonia. It was going to be an epic 50th birthday. And then it was at Madrid, which we have just spent the last several years in Europe going to UN conferences. So I was like, dang it. So I booked my flight anyway. I said, I'll spend my 50th birthday in Madrid. I was just in that area for almost a month with my family earlier last year. So I was just like, dang it. But I'm at the conference. I thought, you know what? I've never been on the first day. So I went to the conference it's a 2-week conference where they bring in everything. They build buildings for 35,000 people, and they, bring in all this air conditioning and all this hypocritical stuff, in other words. And as a media person with Alex, I'm able to go to press conferences. So I'm sitting at a press conference, kind of like the Al Gore story, and I see all this commotion, and I'm like, who's here? And somebody said Nancy Pelosi. I'm like, what? My congresswoman. Yay! So, anyway, Nancy Pelosi, remember in the pretty little red dress just a second ago? Wanting to pass Agenda 21? Check this out. Gravali is here. Senator Whitehouse is here. A lot of delegates from Congress people from California. Jared Huffman, I think, he just walked by California, and here is Miss Nancy.
Comment about Agenda 21. That's
Nancy, that's H. Conres 353. That's why you went to the Real Earth Summit. Because prior to them walking out, she was just bragging about the Green New Deal and how she was a part of it originally. And she was at the very first Real Earth Summit and so proud of the Green New Deal. But the only part that she didn't like about it is the lack of jobs. And then you ask these people to their face, can you tell me about this thing? And it's blank stares, probably with your Congress people as well.
Yeah.
Why don't they want to talk about the largest agenda for the 21st century? I'm going to skip through a few things here because where am I on time? Hal? Mel, I keep calling.
It's 3:30.
3:30? Okay, so we're right about at the hour, right? There's so much information out there on what's going on. I mean, it's just ridiculous that we struggle so hard as a community to try and share with people, what's going on out there. This video that's already sort of played was part of the State of the Valley being Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area. In fact, my governor now, Governor Newsom, spoke at this conference a couple years ago. I went to a 2013 State of the Valley, which was this one. It's $150 per person for lunch, so not everybody in the public can afford to go to these things, but when you're on an agenda to try and prove their agenda, sometimes you'll spend a lot of money to hear the truth from the people behind these plans. In this video, which I won't go through, the keynote speaker, if I could is there a way I could turn down the speaker? I guess I could do it on my iPad here. So what the speaker is a futurist. He's speaking at something called Joint Venture Silicon Valley, which was part of the One Bay Area plan that I shared with you earlier. There are hundreds, if not 1,000 people in this room. Kaiser, Google, eBay, Facebook, all these major Silicon Valley organizations listening to Paul Sappho share about the future. And in this little video, it was sponsored by Kaiser, which is a major medical health hospital in the West Coast. So they paid for this guy to give this speech on what is happening, the movement away from nation states to city states, the movement away from what he says in here in this video, and you can see it on YouTube now, is that the new order, he says, is not about shifting boundaries. So he's talking about how the Bay Area was regionalized, and then he said, but the harder problem is Southern California. Why? Because Southern California overlaps into Mexico. It's way harder to regionalize when you've got international borders. But he says that the new order is not about shifting boundaries, it's about dissolving them, getting rid of them. What happened in the One Bay Area plan? 101 cities, 9 counties, the borders were erased into one comprehensive plan, like I mentioned earlier. So it's a government, we're moving from government and nation states, that is what he said, to governance and city states. City states are your mega region, and it happened under Hitler. This is Kitty Worthman, she experienced it. Is this playing?
Yeah.
When it started, it stopped.
You play it and then louder your volume.
It's so hard to do from an iPad.
Here you go. Need the volume.
The volume's up. Oh gosh.
I was born in Austria, and I lived there 7 years under Hitler's brutal regime. And after World War II, 3 years under Soviet communist occupation. Now, you might ask, how could a Christian nation, almost 100% Catholic, to elect a monster like Hitler? The truth is, at the beginning, Hitler didn't look like or talk like a monster at all. He talked like an American politician. So, when we got the new government, nobody was elected anymore. Everybody was appointed. From the school board, the county commission, the city commission, to the legislature, and to the governor. And Hitler said, the best people are being appointed. We only pick the best people, and we trusted him. So we had no more elections, none whatsoever. We also have regionalism. Regionalism is to centralize the government. Centralization is socialism.
Centralization is socialism, and that is what's happening all across America. Again, I bring you to this map, which you can find, America2050.org. What happens under a system where things start to disappear is so does your state and local vote. Your federal vote will eventually disappear too, as well. It was Samuel Adams who said, let each citizen remember at the moment he offers his vote that he is executing one of the most solemn trusts in human society for which he is accountable to God and his country. But under things like climate change, which is massive change, about behavior change, and also this Mascaphonia that's going, or communist Mascafesto, that's what I call it, all those things are leading to the same thing, which is a one world governance system. The final Paris Agreement was that under that agreement that we as a community, as a collective community, as a global citizenry would do anything possible to maintain the Earth's temperature within 2 degrees Celsius. So which is like what, Willie, 3 point something Fahrenheit.
Yeah. And
So as if, you know, and Willie's you probably talked about this, how you can, you know, with a thermostat turn up and down the earth, the temperature of the globe by getting out of your car, for example. All these things under the Green New Deal that they want to get rid of by simply getting rid of fossil fuel. Why fossil fuel get rid of? Because supposedly it is one of the biggest contributors to man-made global warming. So agriculture would cut all the tractors that require diesel, all the equipment that's made from fossil fuel, the clothing, the textiles, the office, sporting equipments, kitchen and household, infants, baby diapers, baby medicine, and what about medical? All the things in the hospital are made from plastic, are made from fossil fuel. So whose pacemaker goes away under a government, under a system, under a world that has gotten rid of the use of fossil fuel? So I asked in the Madrid conference, I told you I ran into some young people, and I believe this girl was from Sweden. Tina would be able to verify that for me. She might be London, I don't know the accent. But anyway, I was asking around before Alex and others got there, and so I asked this young lady about Trump and what should happen to Trump, because Trump wants us out of that Paris Agreement that would have, and which the Paris Agreement wants us to get rid of the use of fossil fuel, single-use plastic bags, et cetera, et cetera. But here's what she said.
Trump took us out of the Paris Agreement. What do you think should happen to Trump? Well, I mean, I cannot praise him, but I was talking to answer. You would do what? I would like to force him to answer again. Oh, to enter again. Because what, in the United States are one of the most biggest emitters. So well, China's pretty big. But you know what? But we always ask.
Can you hear it?
It cannot be possible that one after another country needs to come. How do you feel about this now? China and India, there are no requirements for them for this whole thing. They're split, and China's the biggest emitter. Well, what do you think about that? I don't like it, but I cannot change. But the only thing I can do is try to focus attention on it and just act myself the best as possible, try to be a role model, try to be other people role models, so I hope that they're doing that. Tough question here. Trump wants to take care of his people, his country. If he has concerns about all this, is it that bad that he's like, wait a minute, we need to step out because my country is the country that's supposed to pay the most, and we haven't in the United Nations. So, but China is the biggest emitter. So what if, playing devil's advocate here, Trump is like, I want more fair and equity for my country, and we're stepping out until we see a more even playing field, because my people, the United States citizens, we taxpayers, we are putting the most money into for decades. I believe, first of all, the United Nations and the United States have a lot of power in the United Nations because of the law. Second, the economy of the United States and democracy in the United States. Salaries got it, so it's okay. We'll be more than people who have less money. And third, I believe that we should not take in countries. We should not think about borders and others. So we have to stand all together and everybody should contribute. And that's not good.
I can't hear. Can you guys hear what she says? I can up here. A little bit. So bottom line is what she said. What?
She's contradicting herself.
Yeah, she's contradicting, and this is, Alex can tell you that this happens all the time. It's actually super fun to go to these conferences and then start really asking the important questions to these people, which I recommend everybody start going to these conferences. Seriously, of 30, 40,000 people, there's like 10 of us who go to these conferences to try and educate, you know, so many possible people to be educated. You know, kids like her, where I did get through to her. It's not this video, it's on my laptop, but I did get through to her where she was like, wait a minute, you know what? Or like the people who called themselves the No Movement about not having children, you know, they're 21 years old, you know, from Duke saying I'm part of the No Movement. And I said, well, what about 10 years from now when you're 30? Do you know how you're going to feel then? No. but you're making, you're acting, you're promoting this. Anyway, you get my point. There's so much opportunity. Yes, Vito, quickly, because we're running out of time.
When we have a table up by the UN, we do this a couple of times a year, and we talk to UN delegates, adults who are actually from other countries, the delegates, they talk exactly the same.
Yeah.
We discuss things, they come over to the table and discuss this, why you want to be out of UN. They say things that are contradictory and
Yep.
confusing.
Yep.
And they
They go back to the 97% scientists say, actually at this conference they were saying 99% scientists say, there were people saying 100% scientists say, it's all about consensus, right? So there's huge opportunity to educate, meet like-minded people eventually, and even though it's maddening, at the same time it's hilarity, and Alex and I said last year we're like, we're never going again. It's so evil and dark. And then this year we were kind of like, okay, we were already planning for the UN conference in December, or it was going to be November in the UK, in Glasgow. We were already planning for that conference before we left Madrid, where the year before we're like, we're done. But we're like, okay, we can make this fun and we can actually make waves. Obama in 2015, I think this might be 14, doesn't matter. In 15, he signed us into the Paris Agreement. He said, no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. Why does climate change matter on United Nations Agenda 21? Because up until COVID-19, it has been the ruse to get everybody globally thinking and acting the same. So what they are able to get done under COVID-19 has been their dream for the last 20 years under United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. Obama says, over the past 6 years, we've done more than ever to combat climate change, from the way we produce energy to the way we use it. That's why we, his administration, set aside more public lands and waters than any administration in history. That Wildlands Project map is going around. Under his administration, more of that proposed map, which supposedly never got passed by the Senate or ratified, got through under his administration. And that's why I'll not let this Congress endanger the health of our children by turning back the clock on our efforts. I'm determined to make sure that American leadership drives international ambition, or whatever it said. He then went on to say, climate action plan strategy to reduce methane emissions, because according to them, under climate change, my cattle cause more methane or cause more global warming than the water vapor that is actually the truest, biggest greenhouse gas on planet Earth, but they're not going to do anything about that. So as you have heard from me for the last couple of years, why are cows so important? Why? Because over 98% of that cow was used in something. The horns for China, the hooves for glue, the fat for helping to, how do you put this? Like to smooth out parts, or, like bullets, so that they can run, go through the gun. Lubricants, thank you so much. It's not just furniture. It's not just those Louis Vuitton bags that you see everybody carrying around that makes, if you have a Louis Vuitton bag, sorry for my statement here, but that makes you, feel or look or whatever like you belong. So we use, that cow is extraordinary. It's amazing. We shouldn't be saying how dare that cow. We should be saying how wow that cow. The ultimate goal of Agenda 21 is a couple things. One is the Wildlands Project map. Biodiversity, saving plants and animals, and those things are more important than human beings. And the second part is to move us into regions, stack and pack housing. That is the ultimate goal of the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Plan. And what's required to do that? Monitoring, controlling, surveilling all people. The red means no human use, the yellow limited to no human use, and let me go back to that one. Oops. I don't know how to go backwards on the iPad. And where are the mega regions? Overlaps into Oregon, or Canada, British Columbia, overlaps into Mexico, overlaps into Mexico, overlaps where am I? Overlaps into Canada again. Here's that America2050.org map. Look at this. Check this out. This, by the way, Department of Transportation, if you see over to the right, go to America2050.org. You can check it out. Department of Transportation, U.S. Federal Highway Transportation Funds, and some other government agencies. So you look here. See the dark? That's human use. That's where humans live. Check out the regional map, where we are now congregated into these 11 regions, mega regions. San Francisco Bay Area, already done in 2013, done deal. And most of the people in the Bay Area have no idea that where they live now is the Northern California region. Even though if you think about it, true Northern California is way up here where my parents' ranch is. But where my parents' ranch is, it's all red. So that's why you see with the Bundys, for example, which was the topic that you saw originally, why the Bundys were under attack. If you're going to develop Las Vegas as a region, as a mega area, and start nudging into, so the idea is that you nudge people closer and closer to the mega regions until the year 2050, this is the reality. So with the Bundys, what happens is a couple things. There's uranium, but the other thing that's going on there is how, under this system, you have to offset your development by giving land back to nature. What occupation requires lots of land for their product? Lots of land, lots of water? Ranches. The Bundys are the last ones standing in that Las Vegas area, outside of Las Vegas. What's his name? Harry Reid had a deal, a solar panel deal with China. He and his son had a solar panel deal with China that was going to take massive amounts of land. So eventually, most of the ranchers, but the Bundys, are out. And now you have the last man standing. And they're like, we've been here 150 years, our family has. We are not getting off our land. They took a stand, and so far, they're winning. Okay, a few more things, you guys. I'm sorry this is going a little bit longer. Something that you need to take, you should start looking into, Alex, I don't know if you've heard of this organization, but they've been predicting, they've been forecasting, they've been telling us what's to come. It's called the Milken Institute, and every year they have a major global summit or a global conference. They also have a health conference. The year that I was going to go was 2016, until I found out that the price to this conference per person was $12,500 or $25,000. But as you'll see in this video with my former boss coming up, there are tons of people who go to these conferences. You either have to be invited or you have to pay a lot of money, if not both. But as you can see on here, this is actually October of 2019. You can see the topic, Making Influenza History, the quest for a universal vaccine. You can see Dr. Anthony Fauci was there. And that whole conference was talking about how do you make vaccines universal. This is prior to the pandemic. If you listen to the videos of this conference, you're like, wait, they were saying if this happens, when it happens, it's gonna happen, and voila. What did we get? This big pandemic, right, that they are now using. But why do I show you that? Because at these conferences, this is in 2016, this is the conference I wanted to go to. I'm going to show you how that what Eric Schmidt, my former boss at Google, what Eric Schmidt was saying in his speech, these things are actually happening today. It's scary. So 2016, and then I'm going to show you where the meat industry is going, that Eric Schmidt was warning us about, but he's all for this.
What's changed is that people have both the money and the ideas are now coming together. What I will do, as just a matter of wrapping up the session, is give you 4 or 5, which I think are the next really interesting moonshots. The first one I call is nerds over cattle.
Nerds over cattle. Can you hear?
As much as we like cows, cows contribute to up to 15% of global warming because
Lie.
of the things cows do. And the fact of the matter is, if we could somehow use plants as part of the food and nutrition cycle rather than meat, right, for the same benefits that we have based on plant-based approaches, we could materially both affect the climate change issues, but also because of the technologies dramatically lower the cost of food globally, and everybody needs to eat. We all understand this very well. So from the standpoint of the impact on the environment and farming and use of water and so forth, there's an extraordinary set of things to do. The thing is that it's synthetic food production from vast databases of organic compounds and molecules and proteins, which we can now assemble that we could not do before for the reasons that you've seen from the earlier speakers.
I don't know why that stopped. Okay, so he goes on to say how it's going to be, machinery is going to be the manufacturers for our meat in the future. So just the other day on Instagram, I follow the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum is the United Nations. It's Al Gore. It's all these big globalists who Alex talked about earlier. It's another organization to watch and follow for where the future, these guys are futurists. And here's what Eric Schmidt said early in that speech. We have the money and the technology now to accomplish what we imagine for the future. You can see scientists in Israel, this is just the other day. So that speech was back in 2016. The World Economic Forum just posted this last week or 2 weeks ago. Scientists in Israel are creating plant-based meat, Eric Schmidt said that has fat, blood, and muscle. He said that these machines would recreate those things that we need in food systems. The steaks are created by powerful 3D printers. Later in that speech, Eric Schmidt talks about how 3D printing is not only helping with this industry, but also in buildings of the future. All buildings, houses. So we're going to use 3D printers to make all that. So they mimic the structure of an entire cow. You can see how many views that has gotten when I started taking pictures of this. 652,000 views already. I'm lucky to get 5. Scientists are creating plant-based meat that has fat, blood, and muscle. A taste of the future, it says. So we analyze the different components that make those beautiful cuts, says the scientist or the technocrat, and try to figure out which are the key components that we need to mimic. We identified 3 main components, the muscle, the blood, and the fat. So there you see the machine making the meat in the lower second picture. But the aim is to make the equivalent of meat from 1 cow every day for the ultimate goal of industrial scale 3D printers for meat distribution in 2021. This is unreal, but it is the future. Our technology can create whole muscle cuts. It's hoped that the use of technology to create realistic meat could help with global food shortages. What are we expecting under COVID-19? Food shortages. Well, lowering greenhouse gas emissions produced by cattle. There's a long way to go, et cetera, to produce enough to help create completely a new food system. Okay, so something that just popped up after that on their Instagram a few days later is this. Now think that Wildlands project map. These guys are telling you where we're going. And they're not stopping. Why? Because we are not stopping them. The Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Project covers 1.3 million kilometers squared, twice the size of Texas. People in Montana, all the way up to Canada, have been talking about the Y2Y agenda for decades now, the Yellowstone to Yukon. In fact, it used to be from Mexico all the way up to Canada. Conservationists say human development has irreversibly altered other ranges. So we're going to preserve 3,200 kilometer wildlife corridors from the US to Canada. You can see the wildlife corridor there, preserving habitat not for human beings, but for plants and animals and everything, like everything but human beings. And this has been predicted for a long time if we were just paying attention. This video is from 2013, Florida professor Reed Noss, and here's what he had to say. You guys, just a few more slides. Thank you for your patience.
Back in the 80s, I devised a conceptual framework for a statewide network of conservation areas across Florida. Now, the real map was very detailed. We didn't have GIS back then. Okay, so it was a paper map, a wall map, 1 to 500,000 scale, on which I put overlays, okay, to draw these corridors and core areas and buffer zones and so on. So this is a very simplistic, honest rendition of that network. Now, as you might imagine, this was perceived at the time as being somewhat radical. It actually
Oh, you guys. Okay, so I accidentally hit. I'm so sorry. What he goes on to say is that this was perceived as radical at first, but Nature Conservancy started adopting the idea, the Audubon Society, and eventually governments. And what he says is, so what they started using those maps for was for land acquisition for corridors like this. Okay, so if you are an American who owns land, you should be looking at that Wildlands Project map and saying, is my land, is my home, is my cabin, whatever it is, my apartment, is it in a red area? Because as we're seeing from these globalists, the things that they say are actually being done. Because again, we aren't standing up. What Reed Noss goes on to say is, yeah, and even the state of California has adopted my idea, and he talks about AB 2785. AB 2785 was already passed by Caltrans. This is it's a regulation, it's a policy. You don't vote for these people, right? You don't vote for the Department of Interior. They are appointed. You don't vote for your wildlife. In the most case, maybe you do in your state, but my state, they're appointed. These directors of these major agencies, bureaucracies that impact how you operate on your land are appointed. They're not elected by the governor. So what this is, what Reed Noss was so proud of, this is the wildlife essential habitat connectivity map for California. The ranch, right here. It's in protected and a corridor zone. So if you took that map and you compared it to the Wildlands Project map, which I don't have in this presentation, you're going to see it looks identical. This is the California legacy area, Foothills legacy area. It's over 2 million acres already given to the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog. So that was a couple years ago. So now what's happening is the implementation. Oh, I'm sorry. No. This is not the Sierra Nevada legacy. This is, so this is 20 million acres being studied for limited to no human use between Fresno and Redding, California. That's what that map is. So that is the breadbasket of the nation, and they're studying right now for limited to no human use. This is where the Sierra Nevada yellow-legged frog is. 2 million acres right now given over to the frog. Not completely. Humans can still go on there, but you're now starting to see signs saying sensitive habitat, no camping, no trespassing, no hunting, et cetera, et cetera. Wow. Other things that have happened around the country, the EPA, unelected, self-appointed agency who signed on under the President's Council on Sustainable Development. They were one of the agencies that fully implemented Agenda 21 and Sustainable Development in 1993 onward. So under the Clean Water Act, probably most people would say it's unconstitutional. They tried to find this young family, Andy Johnson and his wife, with 4 kids. They have 4 kids, and $16 million fine for that stock pond, which Andy put in for his cows, claiming that that stock pond polluted the water below, the stream below the stock pond. Here's the thing. The water that came above this pond and exited this pond were all from a man-made dam. But they were trying to get this family shut down anyway, sue this family, young family, for $16 million. I can't remember what legal agency came up for them, but it was something like $30,000 a day until they got rid of the pond and put his piece of property back the way he found it.
What happened?
They won. The Johnson family won. I'm sure the EPA is coming after them. I mean, the goal is they want his land. That's the thing. Drake's Oyster Bay, this was the largest commercial oyster farm in California. Over 30% of the oysters distributed throughout the California under the Department of Interior Ken Salazar. They claimed that this family was disturbing wildlife in the bay. They set up a private or a security camera, a surveillance camera on the family without the family knowing. The National Park Service did. There was something like 307,000 photos taken of the family over a period of time, and not one photo showed that this family was disturbing the wildlife. What they did find was 2 kayakers were disturbing the harbor seals. But what happened? Ken Salazar, then next Sally Jewell, both under Obama, shut them down anyway, saying that one of the motors, a 2-cycle motor, used to run a belt that it had holes in it, different size holes to organize the oysters by size, was causing noise pollution. They also had lights that they said on their Drake's Bay oyster farm that they said was light pollution. All those things proven wrong, but they shut them down anyway. And now they're going after their cattle ranch in San Francisco Bay Area. This is the river restoration for Merced River in Yosemite. So under river restoration, all these things which have almost nothing to do with the river were gone. Facilities removed. It hasn't happened yet, but this is the agenda. To remove the temporary employee housing, the Ahwahnee swimming pool. My question, as you hear some of these things, is what does this have to do with the river? The Yosemite Art Activity Center, Happy Isle Snack Stand, Curry Village Ice Rink. Okay, I could see that one because maybe they pull the water for the ice rink from the river. Bike stand, raft stand, commercial horseback. What does this have to do with restoring a river which is in perfect condition? Nothing. But what it does is control and get people out of these sensitive areas that they don't want us in. And then I can't do a presentation without mentioning the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history. This will 100% impact my family because the river that runs through my parents' ranch is a tributary to the Klamath River, where there's an agenda to destroy 4 clean, green, renewable energy hydroelectric dams based on what they say is endangered, threatened fish. Coho salmon. I'm sure you can go to your Costco around here and buy coho for $8.99 a pound. But for some reason in this neck of the woods of the planet, Southern Oregon and Northern California, true Northern California, the coho is considered endangered and threatened. Even though Department of Fish and Game, now wildlife, because it's not about game anymore, it's about rewilding America, planted that fish back in the 1900s, but they don't want to admit it because they want to erase history, you guys. This is not about what's right. It's about how do you control the world population in the 21st century. Am I making any sense here? So next year, I've got some really cute videos that just from time and having to do all these different things with this, because my laptop is in Des Moines. I wanted to share this, a couple of videos that I took of these kids at the Madrid conference before Alex got there. Just adorable. I'll just give you a sneak peek of both these kids are from China, and under Biodiversity, they are being indoctrinated that pandas are going extinct, which they're not, and it's because of global warming. I'll go to the little girl because you just want to take her home. Oh. Sorry, I don't know that I can do that. I don't know if I can go to her. On my laptop, I could have. But,
Hello, everyone. My name is Chikutu. I'm from China. This is the first time I'm making a speech for the United Nations, so I'm very excited. I have come here today to advocate for reducing plastic.
Can you hear him?
My speech today will focus on reducing plastics. Plastic products provide nice convenience, but have also changed our lives and polluted the environment. This is the world consensus. Researchers have predicted that 12 million tons of plastic waste will be produced by 2050, and humans will be submerged in our waste.
We'll be submerged in waste.
Thank you very much. Something topic biodiversity. that go from the 9-year-old to the working.
They admit this is a complicated topic, biodiversity.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Lee. I'm 9 years old. You can call me Panda Girl. My story with the panda began when I was about 4 years old. Few people know about its protection and how climate change and human activities are pushing them to the brink of extinction. China has joined the international community in exploring more eco-friendly, sustainable, biodiverse ways of tackling climate change. For example, the natural-based solutions.
Natural-based solutions.
The protection of bamboo forests is the focus of Tribe Panda conservation. Though I am only a kid, I can do my share. For example, I try my best to promote the notion of protecting the environment and planet. Just what I learned today. Actually, I made my speech at school before I came here to share our panda story. My pledge in school is love panda, love earth. Dear flower, and really are. I believe in one place and one home. Here I call upon all of you. Stand with panda. Let's unite to combat climate change. Thank you very much.
You're pretty smart. How old are you? You're 9 years old. And so what actions do you suggest people to take that are going to save the panda bears? What can people do right now? I have a tough question, okay? It's kind of a tough question. You know, bifocal glasses, like some people need to see wear glasses in order to see. So if we take away plastic, which is the same, made out of the same material that glasses are, how do people see in the future? What is your suggestion?
Don't use plastic. But glasses, of course, everyone needs them. Do you see the opportunity we have to change the direction of our future by actually just engaging in these kind of conversations? It's happening everywhere. As a small example, my sister's daughter-in-law, stepdaughter rather, she at 3 years old, she's teaching her 3-year-old that plastic is bad. So my sister's babysitting her a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, Kristen, I just said to Emma, I said, is plastic bad? And not knowing that her mom and dad were teaching her that plastic is bad. And you can guess how they vote. And I said, is plastic bad? And she said, plastic bad? And she said, yes, my mom says plastic is bad. And so we're watching cartoons, and I said, Emma, what do you think that TV is made out of, or Emmy? And she's like, and I said, plastic. And then she has a little toy that she's playing with, and I said, what is that made out of? And I'm not kidding. We went through like examples throughout the day, where at the end of the day, she was saying, plastic, plastic. So undoing the damage being done to these young people, I think, is our cry for the 21st century. Because just to finish this all up, this agenda, the 2030 agenda, coming at us very fast. I think Ben might talk about it on Thursday a little bit. The goal is all 17 of these goals fulfilled upon under the 2030 agenda, which Obama fully put us into. Businesses, Walmart, Disney, Dow Jones, or Dow Chemical, almost every major company that you can think of is implementing under the Business 2030 plan all these things that are based on the United Nations dream of having their agenda be realized in the 21st century. Things like by the year 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor, have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to land. By 2020, protect and restore water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers. No wonder why the largest dam destruction project in worldwide history on the Klamath River, the goal was to have it destroyed by the year 2020. By 2020, and they're not giving up. You'll see it in the newspaper really soon. There's a big announcement made about the Klamath River, which is devastating to all of us who are anywhere in the area. In that Klamath Basin region. By 2020, substantially increase the number of cities and human settlements, because we all need to live in high density living, don't we? And stack and pack housing where you bike, walk, and take public transportation everywhere you go. So then we need these food systems, these new food systems to start feeding the world and to preserve genetically modified food and seeds. And have the number of global deaths and injuries from traffic accidents because your car is a danger to society. It is more likely that, by the way, that you're going to get in a car accident than you get COVID-19. But anyway, achieve universal health care. Of course we know that's the goal. And the ultimate goal for that is vaccines for all. Do you guys see that darn symbol? It's everywhere. This stuff is everywhere, and there should be zero excuse anymore for us not sharing proudly and loudly about all these things. I don't care that we get called a conspiracy theorist. We have the facts behind us. And I truly believe that human beings deserve the truth. Our founding fathers forewarned us. Jefferson said Daniel Webster said our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter, from the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government. So we're not paying attention. We haven't been paying attention. This is why it's, hate to say it, our fault that we are where we are now. Because for decades, people have been forewarning me and others about this thing called Agenda 21, but it just seemed too big and scary, and it's never going to happen here in the United States. Folks, it's here. It's almost done. We are looking at the end unless we start getting in and running for office ourselves as much as we don't want to. I ran. And back in 2012 when I was at the Rio Earth Summit, and I don't want to run again. But if somebody like us does not run, I can tell you who is running. It's scary. They don't believe in our God-given rights. They believe in this stuff. Anyway, I must confess that I do apprehend some danger. What he feared is that we place too much. Look at how we treat our congressmen, like selfies, like they're Hollywood. They're not. There are public servants. They report to us, but we run around as if they're somebody famous, and we should, you know what, we've got to, I do this to my own congressman. I got to buddy up to him so that he favors me, right? But we need to be in their face about this stuff, because this stuff is going through no matter how nice we are to our congresspeople. I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men and become the instruments of our own doing. You guys, we are either Americans or Americans. We either live in the world of being an American where you can build on your own property. You don't have to get a permit. You don't have to pay $10,000 to put in a pond approved by a Department of Fish and Game so that they can monitor your pond every single year and tell you that, yes, it's okay that you do that to your property. That is not the United States of America. That is something way foreign from what you and I, how we should be living. We are living in a time when you can't do this, you can't drive that, you can't eat this, your kids can't go to school there, your kids can't not be vaccinated. We are living in the world of no, you can't. So we are at a critical time where we either sit or stand, and that is the bottom line. And it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be scary, but that's where we are, is we either sit or stand. So with that, I just want to thank you guys all for all the fumbling and, oh my gosh, just thank you so much for bearing with all my tragedies of comedy to pull this thing together. And I truly do want to apologize for it not being what it should have been. and Mel, you can like take all this stuff out.